Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this full council meeting of the 13th of September. So I'd like to particularly welcome our Chief Executive, Stephen Quinn, to his first full council meeting, and I hope everybody will be easy on you, Stephen, for your first meeting. So the meeting is being streamed live and stored for later viewing. I can suspend the webcast if I think it will affect the proceedings. A recording of the meeting will also be published on the Council's YouTube channel. The usual rules for participation: any motions or amendments need to be moved and seconded, and as usual, and votes will be by recall because not all elected members are in the chamber. I'd like to remind everybody that I will be flexible within reason in the length of time people can speak due to circumstances. And also, turning to the agenda, I'm using my discretion to take motions after the council business items, and that allows any staff to leave who are not involved. So, turning to item 1, apologies for absence. Are there any such apologies?
None, Chair.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. The Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any connection they may have in any of the items on the agenda. Are there any such declarations of interest, colleagues? None intimated. Thank you. Okay, item 3, minute of the meeting of the 28th of June. And just to remind you that it's submitted for approval. There's no discussions except on the accuracy of the minutes. So I'm going to go to the minute volume now, and I'm just going to go down them. And please stop me if there's anything that you want to ask a question on. Otherwise, I'll just skip through it, but I'm happy to go back if I've been too quick. So, the minute of the special... No, item 3, minutes, okay? Right, full council, the 28th of June. Agreed? Local review body, the 9th of August. The audit and scrutiny of the 10th of August. Education committee, 17th of August. Special Council, 17th of August, Appointments Committee, 23rd of August, Cabinet, 24th of August, Licensing Committee of the 5th of September, and the Cabinet of the 7th of September. Can we agree all, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. On to item 4 I've got on here, Colin, but I think we've just agreed that, have we not? Okay, so we have agreed it. So we're now on to the next item, which is next one is item 6. Items remitted to the council, and this one is the annual Treasury Management Report for 22-23. And I'd like to invite Councillor Morrison to comment, and then I'll open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much, Provost. The report is as before you in the council papers. I would like to remit this to full council for your consideration and add that on 10th of August the Audit and Scrutiny Committee reviewed the Chief Financial Officer's report on our Treasury Management operations for the year 2022-23. The report explains that delays impacting on some major projects during the year meant that borrowing requirement for the 22-23 year was less than planned for. However, as these projects will still be delivered in the future, we will be taking on the borrowings in later years, so it's simply a delay rather than a reduction. Otherwise, in terms of performance, we've operated satisfactorily against our indicators which measure risk, prudence and debt. And lastly, note that we need your approval for the list of counterparties on Appendix 7. So now remit this to full council for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morrison. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Okay, can we agree and move on? Thank you. So now the next item is statements by conveners and representatives on joint boards and committees. So there are 3 statements. First of all, Councillor Pragnell.
Thank you, Provost. So this is the convener's statement from the Integration Joint Board held on the 16th of August 2023. At our Integration Joint Board meeting on the 16th of August, there was a good discussion around the 3-year children's plan, which is also included on this evening's agenda. The IJB recognised the significant amount of work and collaboration with education and other partners. Further work will be undertaken to strengthen the links to outcomes, and in particular in relation to the Child Poverty Plan. The IJB approved the changes to the fostering and kinship schemes and associated payments, which should bring parity with neighbouring local authorities. This will allow us to continue to grow foster carers within East Renfrewshire, and in particular should help with the recent increase in interventions for 0 to 4-year-olds. The current foster campaign has led to a number of carers going through assessment, which may in turn help with supporting unaccompanied young people. The first revenue budget monitoring report for 2023-24 was presented and identified significant in-year cost pressures, with a projected overspend of £2.6 million for the IJB. The overspend is in addition to the required £7 million worth of savings to balance the current year budget. The IJB has been aware for some time that the pressures had been building and commended the Chief Financial Officer on her transparency of her financial reporting. IJB members took some assurance that the Chief Officer had tasked her senior management team with identifying actions to mitigate costs. The IJB also recognised the tension between meeting the increasing demand for services with increased complexity of need against the financial sustainability. In response to questions, the Chief Financial Officer confirmed that the financial position across the country is being raised through a number of forums, including the Chief Officers Forum, the Chief Financial Officers Forum, and the IJB Chair and Vice Chairs meetings. There was some discussion around areas where charging for services could further be explored, and a short life working group is now in place to review this. The IJB recognised that funding discussions with partners for the current year are likely, and the Council leader requested the mechanism for financial recovery planning and for this process to be fully explained. The Board noted the update in relation to the Savings, Recovery and Renewal Programme, and were pleased that the Care at Home redesign programme has now commenced. The Chief Nurse gave an overview of the Scottish Government policy for annual health checks for adults with learning disabilities, which East Renfrewshire will lead on across Greater Glasgow and Clyde. The programme is funded by the Scottish Government, and recruitment for the new team is underway to allow health checks to commence prior to March 2024. Work is ongoing to identify a model which is affordable and meets the Scottish Government criteria, but annual checks may not be possible or proportionate. The Head of Adult Services, Communities and Wellbeing presented the findings from the recent Adult Support and Protection inspection, which was hugely positive and noted key strengths in terms of processes and outcomes for people as well as leadership. The Board commended staff on the outcome, particularly given the period reviewed was during the pandemic. There were a few areas of improvement recommended, and these are being addressed. Lastly, we had an update on the delayed discharge position. It was noted that East Renfrewshire are performing well within Greater Glasgow, Clyde and across the whole of Scotland. That concludes my convener's statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Councillor Cragnall. Can I now ask Councillor Anderson, Convener of Education, Equalities, Culture and Leisure, to give his statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I have a statement. It has 4 particular areas. The firstly is on SQA performance. Last month at the Education Committee, I was delighted, as was the committee, to hear the outstanding news regarding pupil performance in this year's SQA examination diet. And once again, pupils across the board have achieved the grades required to pursue apprenticeships, employment, or advance to university or college. The SQA results show that attainment in East Renfrewshire continues to increase, with very strong higher and advanced higher results, and also record-breaking performance in S4. It's a remarkable achievement, and I would like to repeat the sentiments expressed at the Education Committee in congratulating the young people, staff and their families for their fantastic performance. The second section of my statement is about the annual participation measure, and We know from what just said there about the exam performance, and it's only one measure of success. And our education department work closely with colleagues in Work East Wren to ensure that our young people not only leave school with a positive detonation, but this is sustained. So the annual participation measure is a way to try and monitor this. The indicator measures the proportion of 16 to 19-year-olds who are still in education, training or employment over the whole year. And I'm very glad to say that the proportion is, as measured as part of the annual participation measure, is an incredible 97.7%, an increase of 0.7% from the previous year and the highest rate in Scotland. But what is really tremendous about this achievement is the number of young people who are living in poverty who are participating, with a 95.5% figure recorded. 98.5% of young people living in quintile 5 were recorded. Thus, we have evidence of reducing the poverty-related attainment gap in terms of participation in education, training or employment, from 7.3% in 2022 to 3% in 2023. Moving on to the third section, and it's regarding the East Renfrewshire Holiday Programme. Last month I joined fellow board members and council officers in visiting our summer holiday camps at Eastwood and Barrhead High Schools. The camps are open for boys and girls aged 5 to 14 years, also including a healthy lunch prepared by school catering staff, and the children participated too. I had some fantastic macaroni cheese. So, a full programme of activities is provided each day by the Trust sports coaches and tutors, with a focus on being physically active as much as possible throughout the day and having fun. Children with additional support needs are accommodated in the camps with the support of pupil support assistants who are recruited for the camps throughout the summer. There are also over 100 free places which were provided for targeted pupils from low-income households through a scheme funded by the Scottish Government, with a further 100 concession places. Out of the 1,000 places that were available at the camps throughout the holiday period, 950 places were taken up, which represented one of the most successful summer activity programmes so far. Lastly, we had also a summer reading challenge, and this year's theme was Ready, Set, Read. East Renfrewshire traditionally has a high rate of participation and completion, and performs extremely well in comparison with other authorities, usually high in the top quartile, and I am delighted to say that this year was no exception. Over 1,500 children took part this year, with almost 900 completing the challenge, a 25% increase in both participants and completion compared to 2022. The ongoing success of the Summer Reading Challenge is down to the hard work and enthusiasm shown by library staff, from attending school assemblies to promote it, to registering the participants and tracking their progress, to working with the children and their families to find their next great read. Our staff are key to its success. As in previous years, the staff have again been supported by a team of young volunteers, or reading hacks, who help with the registrations, and I would like to thank all those who have made this such a highlight of the year for both the library service and our young people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. So I'm sure everybody would join me in congratulating all the good work done in supporting our young people, and also recognising the partnership that takes place between staff, parents and the pupils in their achievement and their personal development. So that was good to hear that. A lot of good news. Thanks very much. So, Councillor O'Donnell, Leader of the Council, will make a statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Provost. This is a good opportunity to address the issue of RAC, or reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, in East Renfrewshire. Obviously, there's a lot of wider public interest in the whole of the UK, but we have received a lot of queries from parents, residents, and also from our unions as well. East Renfrewshire Council was tasked with identifying and developing a reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete management and remediation strategy. We received guidance on how to carry out this process from the RAC Estates guidance published in 2022. A desktop investigation was undertaken by our experienced and skilled technical services team. As per the government advice, we used the age of the properties to identify assets that might require a site inspection for potential RAC. Any properties that fell within the build date of 1930s to 1990s were identified for inspection. We were mindful that several of our properties have multiple build dates due to upgrades and/or extensions. We also used data from historical intrusive surveys that enabled us to positively identify the roof makeup and structure. The buildings that had a type of roof or structure that potentially could be made from RAC were inspected closer. This involved invasive survey work whereby tiles were removed or access taken via ceilings, hatches, until we were confident that the roof makeup was not RAC. We have carefully followed the guidance issued by the government's estates guidance, and we are therefore comfortable we have no RAC present within any ERC properties. To ensure further compliance, we have engaged with a structural engineering company, Cowell Design, who will double-check the investigative work we have carried out to date by our technical officers, that it is correct, and confirms the findings we have already received. And those findings are, to repeat, that we have no RAC within ERC properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to Provost engagement. It's a regular report on civic engagements, and it's for noting. Next item is East Renfrewshire Children and Young People Service Plan 2020. Sorry, Councillor Island.
I just wanted, just on convener statements there, Provost, are we going to hear a convener statement from convener for environment and housing? Thank you.
Sorry, the convener statements are as on the agenda, Councillor. So that's all that's on the agenda, so we'll move on now. So item 10, East Renfrewshire Children and Young People Service Plan 2023 to 26. So the report is seeking approval of the content of the Children and Young People Services Plan for that period I've just outlined, and it's prior to submission to the Scottish Government. So I'll ask if there are any questions or comments on this.
No.
Okay, Councillor Bamforth and Councillor, oh yes, there are another two councillors indicating. Okay, Councillor Bamforth.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to, I don't know if Raymond's here, I can't see him, but well done, Raymond. Excellent as usual, just what we come to expect from East Renfrewshire. There's a couple of, I just want to make a couple of comments. A couple of the figures, bizarrely, I know I always comment on it, it's because numbers have gone up, but that's not that I'm happy that numbers have gone up insofar as I'm happy that there's more reporting, because you particularly mentioned the domestic abuse and the request for assistance. Inquiries had gone up by almost 141%, which, although that sounds very worrying, it's actually good that people are coming forward and actually looking for assistance, because they must be confident that we can support them. So I think that's good. And the MARAC increased by 31% for women and 53% for children. Whilst that's not good, it is good that people are, things are being reported. The one thing I was a bit confused about was the rape crisis and the figures for 13 to 25-year-olds about the decrease. Is that because there is a decrease, hopefully, or is it because they aren't coming forward and reporting, these younger people? Is that, can you elaborate more on that?
Thank you, if that could be answered, and we'll just take question by question. Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Bamforth. I think we've got really good engagement overall, so I think it is partly because we've got that engagement across for those that age range that you described. So I do think we are able to engage better, and therefore we're seeing that the increase that you had outlined. I'm going to invite my colleague Arlene Cassidy as the Children's Strategy Services Manager, because Arlene might have a bit more of the detail to answer.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, obviously what you're referring to, Councillor Bamford, is the strategic needs assessment data. Now the Scottish Government, part of the duties of the Children and Young People's Act is that when you're preparing a children's services plan, that you produce an extensive needs assessment, which makes common sense. You have the needs assessment in order for you to determine what should be in your plan and what you're going to deliver with your partners over the next 3-year period. Yes, the Violence Against Women Partnership provided that data for us, and what that means is that this is what they've found over the last period of time, that there has been a decrease, and you're right to say that the increase elsewhere is hopefully is an indication of increased confidence in processes and relationships, that those things can be reported and that the processes are in place to support responding appropriately. So the rape crisis data will have been assessed by the Violence Against Women Partnership, so we'd be looking to link in with them through the Children's Services Partnership to see how that's been responded to and what concerns have been around there with the partners around that table. So we will take it back.
Councillor Bamford, are you finished with your questioning? Thanks very much. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just to again thank the team for bringing this report forward. I know it's been to the IGB and to education, and there is a huge amount of very positive story within this, and again some tremendous signs of continuous improvement in a lot of the areas. What I would like to say, however, is I know that we did recently have some issues in terms of the promise, and that we're all signed up to the promise. Every authority is, Scottish Government is, etc. And I think it might be worthwhile looking at, as this is a, this paper, this work is continuing and grows year on year. But would it be worth, I know we have a needs impact assessment, we have equality impact assessments, but something along the lines of almost a promise impact assessment to make sure that we are tying it in with the outcomes that are recognised under the promise, to show that we're ensuring that delivery and that promise to all of our children and young people is being kept up and worked on and continually improved upon.
So could that be taken back and considered then, rather than promise? Now, if you could just take that back and consider it, is that enough for you?
Yeah, it's just as a suggestion to see how we can look at it going forward and make sure that we are tackling all of the aspects that we need to touch on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Lundy.
Yeah, I echo what my colleagues have said. It's an excellent report. I'm looking particularly at the education and learning section on page 34 and 35. It's in relation to primary attainment. Primary attainment's dropped significant in terms of those registered for free school meals and living in SIMD, Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation Deciles 1 and 2. I note there's reference to COVID having an impact on attainment. However, the general school population, the table on page 34, shows a smaller decrease in terms of attainment, whereas there's quite a big drop when looking at the table on page 35 with the pupils registered for free school meals and living in SIMD deciles 1 and 2. I was just sort of wondering if there's any more information on why there's such a substantial drop for these specific categories and what we're doing to address that.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask our Director of Education, Mark Ratter, to comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lundy. It's a very important question. I think to respond to that, essentially that period by the end of 21-22 encompasses those COVID years, and within East Renfrewshire what we found was that did affect our most disadvantaged learners more significantly than those from the more affluent backgrounds, and the data kind of backs that up, whether you look at that or whether you look at other data such as attendance data. That was obviously last year, 21-22. We've since then had 22-23, and as part of the sort of papers that go regularly to Education Committee, we shared with committee our Strategic Equity Fund plan, which focuses on that readiness to learn, it focuses on literacy and numeracy, and it focuses on sort of pedagogy and supporting our teachers to be able to make sure that those children and young people that need that support are getting that support. You'll also be aware that the Scottish Government provides pupil equity funding, which is directly targeted to those children that are entitled to free school meals, around about £1,200 for each pupil. And again, our schools, we're working hard with our schools to make sure that that's targeted in the right way and brings about an impact. And at next Education Committee, there will be a report on the impact that our schools are having in terms of how well they're using that money to support those learners that need it most. So hopefully that gives a bit of a flavour of some of the work that's being done around that.
Okay. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Provost. I'd just like to commend Raymond, Arlene, Siobhan and the numerous other people that have contributed to this really comprehensive and detailed report. I'm not going to rehearse the debate we had on this paper at IJB, you'll be glad to hear, and Education Committee, because we covered a lot of ground. But I'd just like to acknowledge that you have responded to all those points, particularly in about how this plan has changed from the previous plan, the local governance arrangements and how that works to be as effective as possible, that the links to the child poverty action plans, and that measures and baselines will be coming forward in due course. And also you responded to the siblings issue as well on schools. So I really appreciate that, and also thanks to Arlene for picking up on getting the right child poverty rates. I've noticed that that's now been reflected in this final report, so I appreciate you picking up. So thank you very much.
Are there any other comments or questions on this? And so can I again, on your behalf and also for our residents, thank you to your officers and everybody involved in education and for this report and all the good work that's been done to protect people, but also to help them in their lives. So thank you very much for that. So we're now on to council tax consultation. So this is item 11. So the report provides an update on the current Scottish Government and COSLA council tax consultation and the anticipated implications for East Renfrewshire Council and residents. And to agree, if you are amenable to that, the council's response. So are there any comments or questions, or can we agree the report? Agree?
Agreed.
Agreed. Councillor Wallace, would you wish to speak? Yes.
Thank you, Provost. Just in terms of I think it's best we try and keep politics out of this in the interest of unity. I think it's important that all councillors are agreed that as far as council tax consultation is concerned, that we have a united front, and it very clearly and robustly states that we as a council are totally against the proposals as stated. There is one thing I would like to draw attention to anybody that may be watching from outside and anybody that's maybe answering this individually or as a group. I do find one or two of the questions slightly leading, in that, for example, the suggestion is that if there is to be no increase, what would be acceptable, i.e. a smaller amount, for example. There is no option in there for the person who's answering or responding to the consultation that zero increase would be acceptable. And also it does suggest that if it's not going to happen now, at what point in the future should an increase go ahead? And it is, I believe, from what we've all, and the way that the council has responded to this, it's quite agreed that there should be no increase at any point of this type of nature at any point in the future. And again, it does not give us that option.
and there's no reference also in terms of that any increases that were to come forward, that 50% of that would go to other authorities. So, as I say, I'm going to keep politics out of this, and hopefully we can all, as a group of councillors in the interests of our residents, just agree on this, that we do not want to see an increase of this nature, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'm going to keep politics out of this as well. I just wanted to say that the paper that we have in front of us, it's drawing attention to the consultation that's running at the moment, and I wanted to sort of use this opportunity, if anyone is watching the recording, to encourage as many people to fill in that consultation as possible. I've got the closing date down as the 20th of September. I'll feed into it on a personal level, and I am sure I just want to encourage. I want to encourage as many people as possible. I think it's good that we get a broader range. I did have there was one question that I wanted to ask, and it can probably be cleared up quite quickly, but there was a figure that stood out. I noticed that on page 115 of the papers that it notes that only 3% of East Renfrewshire households in those higher bands receive help from the council tax reduction scheme at the moment. But then there was another figure that was on the papers on 1110 that said that out of the outstanding, the council tax arrears and the outstanding amounts, that those bands were 31% of the outstanding amounts. Now, it might be down that those are larger amounts that are coming in, but I was concerned when I read that because it's quite a big disparity in those that are actually receiving that council tax reduction help and those that are actually in arrears. So I wanted to, I suppose, to ask, are we doing everything that we can to reach out to those people that are in those arrears, that are possibly in those higher bands? Because I would like to think that they're claiming as much as they possibly can in that council tax reduction scheme, and I wondered if anyone could answer that for me.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Ireland. Louise, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ireland. Yeah, I think there's multiple ways that we try to reach out to people from the very second they get their council tax bill through. We've made efforts to make sure that we explain on the back of the council tax bills all the different ways that people can get support if they are struggling with their council tax, and to highlight schemes like single person discount and council tax reduction. We are also seeing, the report explains that both Money Advice and Rights and Citizens Advice are seeing different client groups coming through them now than would be their traditional client groups. They've still got them, but there's new ones as well. So we're doing everything we can to encourage different areas of the authority, different people, different council tax bands to reach out and to get that help from us, and we'll continue to do that in a range of different ways and with our partners. So, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. And as you say, Councillor Ireland is open to all groups to submit their own individual comments on this. And I like the sentiment for this item, keep politics out of politics. So that would be welcomed by a lot of our residents. So, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to welcome the paper and welcome the cross-party consensus we have on this very important issue. I don't propose to amend the paper, but simply to add that I have made in my own personal submission a reference to question 7, that's page 115, reference to the point about the social impact of this proposed change, because members will note a Scottish Government report titled Social Isolation and Loneliness, Recovering Our Connections, published by the Minister for Equalities and Older People earlier this year, in which it is noted that loneliness is an epidemic in our society. And I would argue that measures which would force a move from people living in established homes and long-established communities where they have social ties to downsize to somewhere where they would be socially isolated would actually exacerbate this issue, which I think the whole Chamber's in agreement we need to tackle. So I appreciate it's a very indirect matter, but I think it could be negatively impacted should this measure go ahead. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much. We agree with the report? Agreed. Thank you. On to the next item now. And that is item 12, Outcome Delivery Plan. So you have the report. Are there any questions or comments on this? None. Can we agree the report? Agreed. Okay, on to item 13. That's the Ors Road project funding. So again, I would ask for any questions or comments on this. Oh, Councillor Morrison, then Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. I welcome the additional investment into this particular area and, of course, the wider City Deal project. But I have a very serious question to ask, and I think all members across the chamber will know, a story from the Daily Record publication last week regarding a very serious incident at the Dams to Darnley Country Park, in which emergency services had to attend to rescue a gentleman who was at the reservoir. So I would like to ask, with us putting investment into the area to attract visitors, that's the very purpose of it, have we identified any safety measures which have to be put in place, either in the future or any emergency measures which have to be put in place now, working in partnership with Scottish Water? Thank you.
Thank you. And Katrina, are you going to address this point? Thanks.
Yes, we're aware of the incident last week. In fact, one of our staff was on site when the incident happened and was able to be there for the emergency services and call them. In terms of access to the dam, there's risk assessments. It's referred to in the follow-on report, a number of risk assessments that are carried out at a local level and also by Scottish Water. And they have assessed in terms of there's no increased risk from the boardwalk, which we're planning to construct as part of our designs. There's no increased risk. But obviously, once these structures are built and in place, then it becomes a live situation, and we would review those risks at that time. I would like to think that increased visitors to the area, more people out walking and cycling, all would add to lowering the risks. The area would be busy, more populated. So it's something we're very aware of. Scottish Water are aware. We have sites, we have staff on site there. We have a park ranger that works in the area, and Scottish Water also do site inspections twice a week. So we're aware of the risks, and we don't propose at this stage that there would be any increased risk from our proposals.
That's it. Thank you.
Questions, Councillor Morrison? All right with that?
Well, in terms of the situation at present, I fully appreciate and I agree with the aspect that with more people being attracted to the area, that would increase the safety of the situation potentially. But have there been any measures identified which have to be taken now, or we need to lobby Scottish Water to take now? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Katrina, sorry, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Provost.
Elaine.
Yes, Scottish Water are our partners in this project, and they have decided they're going to put up new signage. Actually, where the incident happened wasn't an area where we were going to be doing any work. It was near a Brockburn, but they've said they will do new signage and more patrols.
Okay, that's great, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your answers. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. Reading through the papers, it's very clear this is well, I knew it already, but this is an incredibly important project that's been part of the City Deal and talked about for a long time, and it's going to, the improvements are going to be fantastic up there. So still very welcome that we're being asked to approve 3 million out of next year's accounts. It's a substantial sum. So I do have a couple of questions. The first one is, there was talk in the paper that we will still apply for further grant funding for the 24-25 year. So when will we submit for that, and when will we know whether this has been approved? And my second question was, the report mentioned unexpected delays. What are these, and how long have these delays been? Thank you.
Katrina or Elaine?
Thanks, Councillor Ireland. We actually have already applied for the additional 3 million, and Transport Scotland have advised us that we should find out sort of March, April next year. So hopefully the start of the new financial year. With regards to the delays, they were mostly concerned around acquiring land. And as well as that, when we started to look at all the land titles, there was actually an unknown road that ran underneath Balgrey Dam. So we had to, at the time it was the QNLTR, we had to go through a system, a process to allow Scottish Water to get title to that land so that we could then apply to have a lease and servitudes over that land. So these things are all really convoluted and they were out of our hand. We couldn't speed up the process in any way. It was quite an unknown.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ireland. Yes. Yep, okay.
Thank you very much for answering those. My reading of this is if that grant funding comes in March, we will not need to take this £3 million. And I just want to get that confirmed that that's the case.
Yes, that's absolutely the case.
Thank you so much.
And just to add on that, I have made representations to Glasgow City Region Cabinet, who are obviously overseeing all of these projects, to write to Sustrans directly about this extension of the grant funding. So hopefully we might even find out sooner, but we can't count on that at this stage.
Okay, Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Again, just to say that I'm delighted to see this coming forward again. It has been a long time getting to this stage where we're actually looking at the work being carried out. I appreciate the difficulties that we've had over the years, in fact, between the Scottish Water and the landowners to get us to this position. I think many of us had hoped it would have been concluded long before now, but clearly we then had the setback of the pandemic, which delayed matters to some extent as well. So it's great to see it back here and that the work is now ready to progress, and that's a fantastic news story, I think, that we're eventually here, albeit a little later than anticipated.
Thank you. If there are no further comments on this, can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. On to item 14, which is the lease and servitudes related to Orrs Road realignment, and it's asking the Council to approve to enter into the lease, licence to occupy agreement and servitudes required for use of Scottish Water owned land in relation to the Orrs Road realignment City Deal project. Are there any questions or comments? Can we agree the report? Agreed? Thank you. Agreed. Item 15, changes to organisational structure. And the report is asking the Council to approve the proposed restructure of Head of Service remits within the Education Department. We have the Director of Education here if there are any questions, but do you have any questions or comments, colleagues? None? We agree the report. Agreed? Moving on to item 16. That's the East Renfrewshire Culture and Leisure Trust Board appointment, and the report recommends for approval by the Council the nomination of a new independent board member for the Trust following a recent resignation. And we have Anthony Macready online for any questions, or are there any comments? There are no questions or comments, but could you convey the thanks and welcome to the new board member, please, Anthony, unless there's something you want to say yourself on this, Anthony?
No, thank you.
Okay, that was short and sweet. Right, thanks very much. Moving on now to the next item. Yep, item 17. And that's the proposed change to the calendar of meetings. The report asks the Council to approve the change of the date of the meeting of the Education Committee originally scheduled to be held on Thursday the 7th of November 2024 to now be held on Thursday the 14th of November 2024. Is that agreed? Okay, agreed. Thank you very much. Item 18. and that's appointment of the returning officer. The Council is asked to appoint Stephen Quinn, Chief Executive, as the returning officer following the retirement of the former Chief Executive on the 7th of July. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. So we will now turn to the items on the agenda of the motions, unless anybody would like a 5-minute comfort break. No? Ready to move on? Okay. We'll now go to the motions. And if you could just give me a minute for me to get my papers organised as well to go back to the motions. Thank you. Okay, so the first motion is proposed by Councillor MacDonald. Well, Councillor MacDonald and Ireland have submitted this motion. So I will first of all invite Councillor MacDonald to read the motion, and I take it, Councillor Ireland, are you happy to second it? Ireland will second. Are there any amendments to this motion, first of all?
Yes, it's an amendment.
Councillor O'Donnell, is there a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Devlin. So I'll now ask Councillor MacDonald to read the motion.
Sorry, can everybody hear me okay?
So that's you, Councillor MacDonald. Could you read out the motion, please?
Yeah, certainly. East Renfrewshire Council notes A, the increasing public concern about the use of pesticides and herbicides, particularly those containing glyphosate, in weed control and the potential damage to health and to biodiversity. B, Scottish Government guidance, which informs councils to avoid blanket treatment with pesticides and herbicides, except with invasive species. C, several Scottish local authorities have or are currently looking at alternatives to pesticide and herbicide usage. East Renfrewshire Council agrees, 1, to identify and audit the extent of the Council's spending on herbicides. 2, to develop a herbicide policy stating for public information the current uses made of herbicides by the Council and their locations. 3, to consider and report on alternatives to herbicide weed control and the potential for reducing longer-term costs. 4, to pilot alternative methods of weed control and herbicide-free zones in partnership with local groups where appropriate. 5, to commit to the aim of a herbicide-free council, joining numerous other local authorities across Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland, and in other countries, and to set a timetable for the phased elimination of herbicide use by council resources and their contractors. And 6, to recognise how important insect pollinators such as the bee population is to the future of our survival and for the survival of the planet. To that end, East Renfrewshire commits itself to becoming a pollinator-friendly local authority and recognises the harm being caused to pollinator populations by herbicides such as glyphosate. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald, I'll come back to you to ask you to speak to the motion, but I'll first ask for the mover of the amendment to just read out the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. East Renfrewshire Council notes A, the increasing public concern about the use of pesticides and herbicides, particularly those containing glyphosate, in weed control and the potential damage to health and to biodiversity. B, the Scottish Government guidance, which informs councils to avoid blanket treatment with pesticides and herbicides, except with invasive species, and further notes that this council uses herbicides in a targeted manner and not through blanket weed spraying. C, several Scottish and UK local authorities have or are currently looking at alternatives to pesticide and herbicide usage, but are struggling to find alternatives which are cost-effective, less labour and equipment intensive, and have better customer and quality outcomes. D notes that trials of herbicide alternatives in Cardiff City Council showed that glyphosate remained the most effective and sustainable technique, was significantly more cost-effective had lowest environmental impact due to lower labour and equipment costs, and had highest customer satisfaction and quality scores. East Renfrewshire Council agrees, 1, to publicise the Council's herbicide policy, stating for public information the current uses made of herbicides by the Council and their locations, and to improve public awareness of what residents can do to help prevent damage from weeds to their property. 2, to pilot alternative methods of weed control if funding becomes available, whilst noting that Rooken Glen Park is already a herbicide-free zone. 3, to commit to review progress and learnings from other councils across the UK in reducing herbicide use in a cost-effective manner, which minimises environmental, customer and quality impacts, and report back to Cabinet by the end of 2024. And 4, to consider within its biodiversity planning requirements under NPF 4 means of encouraging natural wildlife and sustainability of bee populations, and to incorporate within the Council's biodiversity plans due to be delivered in 2024.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Donnell. So the amendment has been seconded. I will now go to Councillor MacDonald to speak to his motion. Councillor MacDonald. Sorry, 10 minutes, Councillor MacDonald, but you will know that. Thanks.
Thank you, Provost. 2 seconds, I'm just bringing my notes up in front of me here. Colleagues, glyphosate is a broad-spectrum herbicide that is widely used in farming by local authorities, in home gardens and on residential and commercial landscapes. It is the most heavily used pesticide in the world. It is a non-selective herbicide, meaning that it kills all vegetation it is applied to. In both council and domestic applications, it is designed to kill weeds. But we will have all noticed each spring and throughout the summer that councils all across Scotland, including our own, have shifted from using it just for weeds and now use it to kill grass, namely the grass edges of green open spaces, grass verges, in parks around trees and play areas. Instead of either leaving these edges to be cut when the grass is cut or trimming the edges, the council sprays the edges of this grass, killing it and leaving these unsightly yellow dead grass borders around everything the chemical is sprayed on. Quad bikes with tanks of the chemical are dispatched by the council to spray around all of these areas at speed. My concerns are varied. I have concern for the health of the workers who work regularly with this chemical. I have concern for the health of the public that come into contact with the chemical, particularly young children and also pets. I have concern for the impact the spraying of this chemical has on biodiversity and the natural world around us, particularly so for the populations of pollinators such as bees. In March 2015, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, classified glyphosate as, quote, probably carcinogenic to humans, unquote. This was based on limited evidence of cancer in humans from real-world exposures that actually occurred and sufficient evidence of cancer in experimental animals. IARC also concluded that there was strong evidence for genotoxicity both for pure glyphosate and for glyphosate formulations. The IARC monograph's evaluation is based on the systematic assembly and review of all publicly available and pertinent studies by independent experts, free from vested interests. It follows strict scientific criteria, and the classification system is recognised and used as a reference all around the world. This is because IARC evaluations are based on independent scientific review and rigorous criteria and procedures. To these conclusions, IARC reviewed about 1,000 studies. Some of the studies looked at people exposed through their jobs. Others were experimental studies on cancer and cancer-related effects in experimental systems. The IARC monograph's evaluation it indicates the strength of evidence that glyphosate can cause cancer. The probability of developing a cancer will depend on factors such as the type and extent of exposure and the strength of the effect of the agent. On July 7, 2017, California became the first state in the US to list glyphosate to the state's Proposition 65 list of chemicals known to cause cancer. Both the former owner of the brand Monsanto, the current owner Bayer, have had thousands of lawsuits filed against them by people who argue the chemical poses serious harm to human health, including causing cancer. In 2019, a federal jury in the United States ruled that Roundup was responsible for a California man's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and ordered Monsanto and its parent company, Bayer, to pay $80 million in damages. Aside from humans, glyphosate also poses some concern for the environment. For example, in 2019, Environmental Health News reported that researchers linked glyphosate to changes in the growth, metabolism, and reproduction of fish and other aquatic animals, according to the report. Excuse me. Extensive use of glyphosate may cause harm to honeybees and increase maximum residue limits in plants and water, leading to animal disease. It could also change the communities of microorganisms, which could upset food chains and ecosystems. Only one park in East Renfrewshire is glyphosate-free. That is Rooken Glen Park. Why? Because it has continued to be awarded the International Green Flag Award run by the UK Government Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. One of the requirements in order to be considered for such an award is, quote, policies should seek to eliminate the use of peat and chemicals to control pests and fertilizers. Horticultural and arboricultural decisions should reflect an understanding of the impacts of climate change and biodiversity. The department responsible at this council for maintaining this park recognises the impacts to the environment of the use of chemical herbicides, such as glyphosate, and recognises and complies with this requirement specific to Rooken Glen Park. It's now time that the same degree of recognition of the impacts to biodiversity are afforded throughout all of the council area. Colleagues, this is a chemical that we should be reducing the spraying of within our communities and using very sparingly on only the most necessary circumstances. I can accept that in cases of Japanese knotweed and giant hogweed, there may be justification for its use in a very targeted and controlled manner. But the spraying of this in our neighbourhoods, in our parks, along our verges, around schools and children's play areas, just as a method of killing grass rather than using other methods, is just not good practice. It fosters protection to human health, the health of our pets, or the health of our environment. Perhaps the ceasing of its use for these purposes needs to be part of a wider strategy to allowing rewilding of our open grass areas and our verges, allowing for natural growth of wildflowers. I can't help but feeling that the communities that live within our urban areas have been all too accustomed to a manicured and neat and tidy appearance of open grass areas and verges, and perhaps consideration should be given that maybe the commonly held expectation for everything to look so freshly cut and trimmed is no longer realistic to properly sustain a healthy level of biodiversity. Colleagues, I move this motion in my name. I thank Councillor Ireland for her support, and I would ask you to all consider supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Ireland, would you like to speak? 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Provost. This is such an incredibly important motion, and I want to thank Councillor MacDonald for bringing this before the Council. I am, however, extremely disappointed by the lack of ambition that's evident in the amendment.
East Renfrewshire Council needs to, as a matter of absolute priority, to work towards a sustainable future in sustainable places, and our actions need to be ambitious enough to demonstrate very clearly that East Renfrewshire is taking the climate emergency seriously. It's very close to my own heart. I've been contacted so many times by residents who are so worried about our overuse of herbicides here locally. They want to see us reduce immediately our reliance on these and to introduce measures as a matter of some urgency, which can include, for example, Councillor MacDonald was talking about, those wildflower corridors and in developing our local pollinator plan. We cannot ignore that the widespread and unnecessary use of these chemicals is a key driver in the catastrophic decline of insect populations, which in turn threaten our food security and risk ecological collapse. In the last 50 years, human activities have reduced the number of insects dramatically. Recent evidence suggests that the abundance of insects may have fallen by 50% or more since 1970. The Wildlife Trust has written recently that it believes that a significant reduction in pesticides and herbicides use is urgently needed to reverse insect declines, improve human health and create a wilder future. Failure to do so risks a collapse of the natural systems on which humans and wildlife depend. Local councils are actually one of the main uses of these chemicals, or users of these chemicals, spraying this in our parks, our playgrounds, other green spaces, road verges. We've all seen it everywhere. Cemeteries, pavements and around council homes across East Renfrewshire. In most UK towns and cities, it's currently impossible to avoid exposure to these chemicals. However, a growing number of places around the world have already gone pesticide-free and are proving that it can be done. The amendment mentions Cardiff Council, but it's important to note that several Scottish councils are already well ahead of East Renfrewshire and are committed to becoming pesticide-free councils. One such instance is our neighbouring council of South Lanarkshire. In February of this year, their Climate Change and Sustainability Committee discussed a paper which provided a final report and recommendations on their trials which they'd already previously carried out, which investigated alternative weed control methods. This followed an initial motion in December 2020. Overall, the trials are considered a success as use of glyphosate has reduced by 30% alone during the trial period. South Lanarkshire are aiming to cut back on their use of these chemicals, and the new methods of weed control will now be incorporated within day-to-day operations. There were several that they looked into and they're going to keep using them, with staff receiving any additional training required. In addition to South Lanarkshire, our other neighbouring council, just the other side, Renfrewshire Council, also decided to phase out using glyphosate entirely over the next 2 to 3 years, while trialling alternative weed killing methods. So they're going through that weed killing, the trial period just now. So that's on either side of us. Cutting back through a phased approach, as this motion mentioned, on our own use of harmful pesticides will also support delivery of our obligations as part of the new action plan on sustainable use of pesticides. This action plan was drafted by DEFRA, the Scottish Government, the Welsh Government, the Department of Agriculture and the Rural Affairs Northern Ireland. All of these would want us to cut back. The action plan requires councils to reduce use of herbicide and test alternative methods. This is UK-wide. The high-level aim of the revised National Action Plan is to minimise the risks and impacts of pesticides to human health and environment, while ensuring pests and pesticide resistance are managed effectively. East Renfrewshire Council prides itself on, and again this is this word, being an ambitious modern council. What we need here in our council is a very clear pesticide policy, which includes a progressive and sustainable phase-out, it's only a phase-out we're talking about, of harmful pesticides such as glyphosate, and a thoughtful public engagement plan which encourages a shift towards greater appreciation for biodiversity, as Councillor MacDonald was talking about. We can join other Scottish councils, our neighbours, and bring in this reduction in our use of pesticides and help create green and diverse neighbourhoods for both people and nature to thrive. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Ireland. You were just over, but I just let you go to finish. Didn't want to interrupt you. I think we can allow that. So, Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Provost. I thank Councillors MacDonald and Ireland for raising the issue of glyphosate to Council. As is rightly stated in his motion and acknowledged by our amendment, there is increasing public concern about the use of pesticides and herbicides, and glyphosate in particular, and their potential damage to biodiversity, although impact on public health is more inconclusive. Although I do take on board Councillor MacDonald's concerns about close exposure to staff, and I'm sure Council officers will review this closely and take that message on board. This is not, however, a new issue, and one that councils across the UK have been grappling with for a number of years. Many have looked at alternative methods of weed control and have struggled to find cost-effective solutions which are not more labour and equipment intensive, that are not better for the environment and have better and customer and quality outcomes. Bearing in mind what Councillor MacDonald mentioned on rewilding, I think that is a really interesting concept that is being raised there. I know some councils are looking at that, and I know it was considered previously by this council. I think that is something that we would need to consult with the public on, because I'm sure most members here are familiar with many complaints from our residents about not enough grass cutting. So I think that is an important debate, and the time for that is to be determined. I raised this issue recently at COSLA Environment and Economy Board, and as yet there are no other solutions or case studies that was offered from them from other councils in Scotland, which are not more expensive and have better customer and quality outcomes. I am sure our officers heard your comments on Renfrewshire and South Lanarkshire, and will review those with interest. And as we commit to later on, we will commit to review case studies in other authorities, and how we can best use the learnings to help reduce our consumption of glyphosate. Going to the case study from Cardiff City Council, I think that was very telling. They tested 3 herbicides, acetic acid, yes, vinegar, hot foam, glyphosate, and a control area with no treatment at all. They assessed the test under 4 measures: labour and material costs, environmental impact, meaning water, use of herbicide, fuel costs, and life cycle analysis of carbon dioxide emissions, customer complaints, and quality of weed eradication. Their scientific survey came to the unequivocal conclusion, and to quote, glyphosate was the most effective and sustainable of the herbicides tested. That all being said, we are not going to stand back and do nothing. The amendment modifies the motion to make it more pragmatic and meaningful for this council. On the motion's request to identify and audit spend on herbicides, I can confirm that this council uses around 300 litres of herbicide a year at a cost of around £12 per litre. With the amendment, we are happy, 1, to publicise the council's herbicide policy and to improve public awareness of what residents can also do to help prevent weed damage from their own property. 2, we will pilot alternative methods of weed control if funding becomes available. In times when the environment budget is significantly stretched, members need to be mindful of increasing costs to services, as that increased cost will have to come out from other services. We would like to note that Rook and Glen Park is already a herbicide-free zone. 3, we will commit to review learnings and best practice from other councils, and as I referred earlier, I'm sure our officers will be keen to hear more about what's happening in South Lanarkshire and Renfrewshire as they develop their case studies. And our particular emphasis will be in reducing use in a cost-effective manner, not by increasing labour, and minimising environmental, customer and quality back, and to report back to Cabinet by the end of 2024. And finally, 4, in addition, we will address the concerns about encouraging natural wildlife, and I think this concept of rewilding may come up again as we look at the biodiversity plans, and looking specifically, which was mentioned in the motion, about bee populations, which is important to all of us, within the various biodiversity plans that the Council will be delivering in 2024. I would hope that all members would agree that we have taken the spirit of the motion by Councillors MacDonald and Ireland seriously, and have provided a pragmatic and meaningful amendment that the whole Council can get behind and support. I recommend the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. And your overrun matched Councillors Ireland, so all fair. So, are there any other? Sorry. Councillor Devlin, just to confirm that you're seconding, do you wish to speak?
No, just echo Councillor O'Donnell's comment.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll open it up for anybody else to contribute. 5 minutes each person. Councillor Bamforth.
I don't have a statement or anything to make. I just would like, I don't know if this is the done thing, to ask a couple of questions of Councillor O'Donnell on his amendment.
Sorry, no, you've got 5 minutes to speak, Councillor Bamforth, so if you would like to use your 5 minutes to do that, thanks.
Well, all I would like to say is that I would question a couple of the statements in the amendment. Like has been said, I think we all get concerned residents contacting us about this, and it is getting that balance right, with the ones that complain when the grass isn't cut and the ones that complain when they see the damage caused. But I'm a bit intrigued by what the amendment mentions about the Cardiff City Council. When they did their feasibility study, or whatever it was they did, when it mentions that they had the lowest environmental impact due to lower labour and equipment costs, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm not quite sure what is meant by that. How lower? I guess equipment costs, it's the production of the equipment, but I'm really not sure. It's really not very clear. And I'm also a bit intrigued as to the East Renfrewshire Council agrees to improve public awareness of what residents can do to help prevent damage from weeds to their property. This amendment is nothing to do with what residents should be doing. This amendment is to do with the council and the phasing out of the herbicides. So I can't understand why they mention I think what residents can do, because I think residents are more than aware of what to do and what they would like done in their own property. So I am a bit at a loss as to what this amendment actually says, other than we'll have a look at it and we'll look at what others have done, when there is clearly some evidence out there, as Councillor Ireland has mentioned, in both Renfrewshire, where they've done quite extensive, are in the process of doing extensive research, and in South Lanarkshire, when they already have. So I can't see that this amendment really says anything other than we'll look at it. So I am in favour of the motion, because I can't see that the amendment actually is constructive in any way or helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bamford. Does anybody else wish to speak on this? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. Just looking at I'd like to thank Councillor MacDonald for bringing this forward. I think he makes some very clear and legitimate concerns about the use of glyphosate. But I would also like to thank the Leader of the Council for what would appear to be a very positive approach that he has taken on behalf of the Council to Councillor MacDonald's concerns. I am particularly enthused by the fact that there will be a report coming to Cabinet which will hold the Council to account on I would suggest, promises that are being made within the amendment. And on that basis, and the fact that we will have something there in which we can compare what's happening now with what will be happening in the future. For example, the use was at 300 litres of glyphosate we've been using. So perhaps that could be a measure of how things are progressing, and hopefully they will do within the next year. So on that basis, I'd be happy to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. If there are no other colleagues wishing to contribute to this discussion, I will now hand back to Councillor MacDonald to sum up, and you have 5 minutes for that, Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Provost. Look, in short, this is a chemical that's being sprayed abundantly within my ward. Certainly every spring and into the summer, we see these yellow lines around all of the grass areas. And I can tell colleagues that the reports coming back from my residents in my ward are not good. They're not happy with this stuff at all. And I feel that we as a council are pushing something on our residents that they simply don't want. Now, I accept that in terms of it itself, glyphosate is a very effective herbicide. It kills on contact, and it probably is the market leader for what it is. But it's a strong chemical, and just because something is strong and cheap or cheaper than the alternatives doesn't make it necessarily the best thing to do. You know, asbestos was cheap. We banned that. Now, I think going forward, my comments on rewilding, I think are something I think the council definitely needs to look at, because we have large swathes of open green space that are continuously getting cut, but the complaints that are coming in from residents about the grass cutting is usually something around the frequency of the grass cutting not being frequent enough and the grass getting looking quite unkept. And then when the grass cutting is done, it's not done effectively. Some areas it's been described as a hack job. A lot of the mowing that's done in my ward, where mowers are coming out and they're cutting part of these open green spaces, but areas close to trees they're just letting to grow. Now, we either decide whether we're going to be a council that maintain these grounds by grass cutting them, or we decide whether we're going to be a council that looks to the future of rewilding these areas. If we're going to rewild them, it's an entirely different thing, because we're going to allow this grass to grow up to knee length and allow wildflowers to grow within these meadow areas. That's entirely different than, say, an area that has not been maintained frequently enough to be grass to have the grass cut. So I don't think the complaints about, or the complainers are going to be complaining about the fact that the grass isn't being cut frequently enough to keep looking relatively tidy, are going to be the same complainers that will complain about rewilding of meadow areas. There's been a big call in my ward for this to happen. I don't know if anybody has noticed during this summer or not, there has been a distinct lack of bees. I haven't seen any, hardly any bees. Now, I don't know whether it's just an unusual thing for this particular summer, but I have certainly noticed it. And it's worrying to me, very worrying, because this chemical is being sprayed everywhere. It's being sprayed in farms, in close proximity to the area that we live in. It's being sprayed by councils all across Scotland. It's everywhere. It's running into our rivers and our streams in the runoff. It's been reported that pets have fallen sick when they've ingested grass that has been sprayed with it. These are serious concerns. And I think if we are to say, we're always lauding ourselves that we're an ambitious and a progressive council, I think we need to really seriously look at this. We are calling for alternatives to be used in a trial phased out type programme. That's all we're calling for at this stage in this motion. I would therefore ask colleagues to really look at this motion and please support it. It is something that residents are really wanting in their area. I realise that there are alternatives that we can use, and we also can go for rewilding as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. I will now ask Colin to conduct the vote, and it will be a roll call vote now, since there are members online.
Thank you, Provost. Members are asked to vote in favour of the motion or the amendment, or to abstain. Please respond motion, amendment or abstain when I call out your name. Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bamforth.
Motion.
Councillor Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Convery. Okay. Councillor Cunningham.
Amendment.
Councillor Devlin.
Amendment.
Councillor Edlin.
Amendment.
Councillor Ireland.
Motion.
Councillor Lundy.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Motion.
Councillor McLean.
Amendment.
Councillor Merrick.
Motion.
Provost Montague.
Amendment.
Councillor Morrison.
Amendment.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Amendment.
Councillor Pragnell.
Amendment.
Councillor Wallace.
Amendment.
Thank you. The results are for the motion 6 and for the amendment 10. The amendment's carried.
Thank you very much. Can I just check? We didn't get a response from Councillor Convery there, and I don't think that there were apologies. Was Councillor Convery present at the beginning of the meeting? And I wonder at what point did we leave her?
She's in hospital with her mother apparently, and I think she's lost contact. She was trying to log back on, but she's maybe not been able to do so. She's certainly messaged us to see she was trying.
Right.
She's
So,
maybe not
sorry,
possible.
Councillor Bamford, I just wondered at what point did we lose her from the meeting at all? You know, so it's from now on. I know that she's not present. Leona?
She went offline just before the motions were considered, so it wasn't too long ago, but it was just before we considered motions.
Okay, I did notice. It's just to find out. Okay, thank you very much for that. So that's that motion. So on to the second motion now, and that's Councillor Ireland and Lundy. So, Councillor Ireland, you the mover of the motion? Yes. And can I check, Councillor Lundy, you're going to second the motion? Okay, that's fine. And so are there any amendments to the motion from anybody else? Because otherwise I would like just to propose just a small amendment that I would hope that you would accept. So we'll go to the usual procedure for Councillor, and first of all, sorry, I've got a small amendment, but I would like somebody to second it to enable me to speak to it.
I will second it, Provost.
That's fine, thanks very much. So I'll ask Councillor Ireland to speak to the motion, please.
Am I allowed to ask? I'm allowed to ask a question about the amendment that you're putting. It's just for clarity for myself before I discuss it quickly with my colleagues.
And myself.
Well, it's suggested we have a wee break just to consider this, so we'll do that. We'll have a 5-minute break, and that way we can.
Thank you.
Okay, 5-minute break, everybody. Thank you.
Thank God.
We ready? Okay, thanks. So thank you very much for that short recess, and I will now ask Councillor Ireland to read out her motion, which has been seconded by Councillor Lundy. Can you formally second? Thank you, Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. Council notes that the use of food banks has risen sharply since 2010, with demand this year higher than ever before. Notes and thanks the many volunteers and organisations across East Renfrewshire that run and manage food banks, larders and help those in need. Expresses great concern that food banks, food larders and baby banks are facing high levels of demand from adults and children in need of vital help at this time. Council therefore agrees to follow other local authorities and facilitate a regular food donation collection within both the Barrhead and Eastwood Council buildings to help local food banks and food larders meet the increased need.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ireland. So now I will propose just a small amendment to that, which has been seconded by Councillor Pragnell, and that is to delete the last point about follow other local authorities and instead to insert the wording that the Council applauds the work of the staff in their charity endeavours with regard to food banks, and appreciates that staff will continue to do as they are, voluntary and in their own time over the autumn and winter months, and that the staff involved will feed back the success of their initiative in the spring to councillors. Is that agreed?
I agree with that, as long as I have clarity that the initiative to start collecting for food banks starts just now and we revisit it in the spring.
As far as I understand, it is already ongoing, Councillor Ireland, so this is a continuation. So that I'm aware that they have done this in the past and it's not new, but I will confirm with Louise just to let us know about the values group.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, there are collection points. Schools do a lot in terms of this, and Spearsbridge has a collection site already, and I understand there is something already live in some of the health centres, but we will take action to institute something again back in HQ and Barrhead council offices. There was something in the past and that has waned over time, and we will institute that now for you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be in agreement, but would you like to add anything, Councillor
Just want
Ireland?
to say that that's very welcome news, and if Councillor Lundy agrees, we accept the amendment. We accept the amendment.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ireland did speak about this amendment, and it's good to have cooperation, and we both agreed about the wonderful work done by the staff, and so it would be helpful, I'm sure I speak on behalf of all our colleagues, for that to be conveyed. We know about the work that's done with all the fundraising for the Doing It for Daniel charity, and other work that they are all involved in, including the cycling fundraising that took place. There was also a gruelling fundraising challenge at Whiteley's, and next week we can all buy a recipe for pakora. And again, it's fundraising done by the staff. Our staff are wonderful. We know that when we have the awards to staff, it's time and time again, they go above and beyond, and just we can't thank them enough in recognition. So thank you very much for that unanimous decision. We don't have to go to the vote. I'll bring you in a minute, Councillor, if you want, but can we all agree the amended motion? Agreed? Thank you very much. Councillor Wallace, did you want to add anything about the staff?
Yeah, thank you. Just curious if I could ask Chief Executive, when you're saying that we're going to be starting immediately with, what initiatives exactly are you starting that's not happening just now? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. The Staff Values Group are going to start up again the delivery points in both headquarters here, Barrhead offices, and continue the deliveries at points at the two health and social care offices. So it's to have food collection points both here in headquarters and in the Barrhead office. And then the staff will ensure that those deliveries and donations that people give here are taken to the food banks that have that they work with, to ensure that they can then distribute the food out accordingly. Okay,
thank you very much. I'm now closing that. Thank you very much, everybody, for your support for that. And I'll move to the next item. The next item. So the third motion now is, I'll just find this. Motion 3. Councillors Bamforth and Lundy have submitted this motion. So I'll just confirm, Councillor Bamforth, you are the mover of the motion. Councillor Lundy, going to second this. Okay, so I'll now go to Councillor Bamforth to read. Oh, no, sorry. Are there any amendments?
I would like to make an amendment, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pragnell. Is there a seconder to the amendment?
Yes, myself, Councillor.
Councillor Anderson.
Sorry, Provost.
Yeah, and there is an amendment being circulated. Give you a minute to just have a wee look at that. I'm just wondering if is that enough time for anybody, for you all to read? Sorry? Okay. Just to point out, it's double-sided, so in case you think getting to the bottom, there's another side to it. But does anybody need any more time, or can we go to Councillor Bamforth? Okay, Councillor Bamforth, are you ready? Thank you very much. 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm about to Councillor Cracknell's there. I still had it in hand. As noted in today's motion, this proposal was previously brought to full council in October 2022. Unfortunately, our motion was defeated. Sorry, my laptop's playing up because somebody's joining by Teams.
Sorry, you're reading out the motion, Caroline.
Oh, sorry, if I read the motion first, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, my laptop's playing up a bit here. Apologies, it popped up somebody's. We're going to join the. Started the recording, so it pointed up. It came up on my screen. And has you got it there? Right, I can't get it. Apologies. So the motion is, at the full meeting of the Council on the 26th of October 2022, page 263, item 201 in the Council papers, it had been agreed that the officers be instructed to formulate a council-wide strategy for the deployment and maintenance of public access defibrillators, and to lobby the Scottish Government to provide additional funding to allow it to partner with voluntary, charity and community groups to implement this policy. In addition, Council considered a report by the Chief Executive on the deployment and maintenance of public access defibrillators, including the current position, current costs involved and the options of funding to support it. Council A welcomes the work currently underway to identify the locations of defibrillators within our communities. B notes, however, in the past 18 months, actually it's 9 months, but from the Council meeting of 26th of October 2022, there have been no new defibrillators installed or planned in East Renfrewshire. Furthermore, no money has been forthcoming from the funds set up by the Provost for this express purpose. Notes, in addition, as a consequence of this paper, this has led to an unfortunate loss of potential match funding and funding for ongoing defibrillator costs for community groups who wish to install their own defibrillators. Due to this inaction, Council Number 1 notes that every year over 3,000 people in Scotland, including children and young people, experience an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. 2 notes that unfortunately only 1 in 10 people survive such an event. Automated external defibrillators can play a significant role in saving the lives of people who suffer heart attacks in public. It is estimated that a shock from an AED, a defibrillator, alongside cardiac pulmonary resuscitation treatment increases survival rates to 75 to 80%. 3 notes that although there are public defibrillators in various places across East Renfrewshire, including some council premises and assets, there are gaps, especially in the provision of publicly accessible AEDs, defibrillators, within or at our local schools. Therefore, Council agrees to bring a report to full Council no later than December 2023, detailing a plan to roll out more publicly accessible AEDs at all our primary and secondary schools.
Thank you, Councillor Bamford. It's already been seconded. So now I will ask Councillor Pragnell to read out the amendment, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. At the full meeting of the Council on the 26th of October 2022, page 263, item 201 refers, it had been agreed that officers be instructed to formulate a council-wide strategy for the deployment and maintenance of public access defibrillators, PADs, and to lobby the Scottish Government to provide additional funding to allow it to partner with voluntary, charity and community groups to implement this policy. In addition, Council considered a report by the Chief Executive on the deployment and maintenance of PADs, including the current position, costs involved and funding options. In addition, Council confirmed the Provost's community defibrillator champion. Council A notes that 2 new defibrillators have been purchased and will be installed at Kirkhill and Maidenhill primary schools in the immediate future thanks to the collaboration between the Provost and the parent councils. B welcomes various recently completed or imminent installations in communities by other organisations. C, this will increase the number of defibrillators at council-owned buildings to 28 and increases the number of defibrillators across East Renfrewshire on the British Heart Foundation database known as the Circuit to 82. D welcomes the work currently underway to identify the location of defibrillators in our communities, understanding that locations may include further primary and secondary schools, but not necessarily all, as other locations may be more suitable for 24-hour access. E notes the Council is conducting an ongoing live survey locally to identify the locations of any further defibrillators in East Renfrewshire. F notes that Save a Life Scotland has cited East Renfrewshire Council strategy as a good example of good practice and have signposted the work to other local authorities in enhancing defibrillator provision. G notes that working with local community groups to provide the appropriate legal, insurance and procurement standards takes time to ensure the long-term sustainable provision and maintenance of PADs. H thanks the providers of a very generous donation of £9,000 to help start the Provost Community Defibrillator Fund. This fund has been set up to allow donations and funding for PADs to be collected and to raise awareness of life-saving skills including CPR and how to use a defibrillator. I notes that the fund will be formally launched on Tuesday the 19th of September. J thanks the numerous community groups and charities who have worked with the Provost to deliver a sustainable solution for the people of East Renfrewshire. And K notes that the officers will submit a final report to the December meeting of full Council on the work that has been undertaken on this strategy, and which will include information on the cost of the programme going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pragnell and Councillor Anderson. You've already intimated that you'll be seconding the amendment. So I'll now hand back to Councillor Bamforth to speak to the motion, and 10 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. As is noted in today's motion, this proposal was previously brought to full Council in October 2022. Unfortunately, our motion was defeated, so as per the amendment agreed at the time by Labour and the Tories at the October meeting, a further report was subsequently brought to Council in December 2022 with a proposed strategy on the installation of more defibrillators within the community. Although the 6 months condition for bringing a motion back to Council elapsed in April 2023, we waited to allow more time to see if the proposals in the amendment moved the situation forward. Obviously, this amendment has slightly changed things, but as of today, they're 11 months on, today, 13th of September. 11 months on from our original motion and 9 months on from the paper brought to full council with a proposed strategy. No new defibrillators have been installed or even planned, and there is no money currently available as of the 13th of September in the Provost Fund to do so. As I mentioned in the original motion, it's a matter close to my heart, and I know it is to the Provost as well. And even for those of us in the Chamber who perhaps don't have the same personal experience, I'm certain everybody agrees that this is an important matter, and that the installation of defibrillators in or around our school premises would provide a potentially life-saving service for our children, school staff and our surrounding communities. I was part of the Cabinet back in 2018 which approved the purchase and installation of around 25 defibrillators throughout the authority. I know I'm not exactly sure of the numbers because we agreed a fund. This was a financial decision approved at the time by the SNP Labour Administration, as it was the right thing to do for the safety of our communities. 5 years down the line, it's time for this to be expanded so that more of our residents and people working within the area have that crucial safety net. As I've stated, this is purely a financial decision on how best to use our resources, as it cannot be that anyone can disagree with such a worthwhile essential service to provide to our communities, and one which other councils have already agreed on. For example, in East Dunbartonshire, similar local authority in size to us, the motion was agreed unanimously and cross-party that they would progress a network of publicly accessible defibrillators, as the evidence was clear that where external defibrillators are available in an emergency and before the arrival of emergency services, they can be life-saving. They estimate the cost of 24 defibrillators to be around £60,000. Renfrewshire Council approved the installation of defibrillators in and around all their school premises, who currently don't have one in 2022. The question of funding was raised previously with the amendment from last October, placing responsibility squarely on the Scottish Government. However, as we have seen, other councils, sometimes cross-party, have agreed to finance this from their council funds. Whilst extra money from the Scottish Government would be very welcome, we need to remember that we're currently spending around £600 million a year in Scotland mitigating some of the more brutal Tory policies, such as bedroom tax, rape clause, etc. Not to mention the fact that we're now paying a Scottish child payment of £25 a week for each child under 16 to our most vulnerable families. Whilst we know the councils throughout the UK are struggling financially, as we can see from councils in England even this week that have announced bankruptcy, we believe that this can be funded locally if there's a will to do so. After all, we were asked to approve an extra £3 million for the Orrs Road alignment from council funds earlier this evening. We also know that despite the original predictions, the unaudited East End Council accounts for 2022 show that the council had saved £5.6 million, mainly due to increased income, including interest earned on temporary investment balances and higher council tax collection arising from new build completions, as well as savings related to the teachers' industrial action. I want to turn very briefly though to the amendment that's been put forward by Councillor Pragnell and Councillor Anderson. I'm a bit perplexed by this because I was at the Kirkhill Parent Council last week, and it was not mentioned in the accounts, it was not in the agenda, it's not been agreed that a defibrillator has been purchased, and I would like to clarify that, and I've actually emailed them during the course of our, this amendment, reading it, because I am not aware that they have purchased it, and I am aware that some members have contacted me because they're a bit wary of the Parent Council taking on the very onerous responsibility of maintaining a defibrillator, given the consequences if it is not done. It just doesn't bear thinking about. So I would query that, because that certainly wasn't the case last, can't remember, it was last Tuesday or last Wednesday I attended Kirkhill Parent Council. I missed the Maidenhill Parent Council, sorry, not Tuesday there, it was the Tuesday before, I missed a Maiden Hill Parent Council last week because I was on holiday, but I am not aware that they have purchased it. I know in the minutes it said that they were looking at it, so I am not aware that there are another 2 defibrillators purchased for our schools, and I would like clarification on that. So, but just to end, I would urge all members to agree this motion. Given the cost, I mean, it's not a huge cost financially, but to those people that it could help, it's immeasurable. So I would wish all members to actually vote and agree that the council, from whatever budgets, either from the possible 3 million we might not have to pay in Orrs Road, whether it's the 5.6 million that we've possibly saved, which means that we won't have to cut anything else in order to fund this. Please all vote for the council to fund the installation of defibrillators in and around all our school premises. Thank you.
Councillor Lundy.
Thank you. Last year, Councillor Bamforth and myself brought a motion similar to this, which was voted against by the Labour and Conservative groups. The Labour group brought forward an amendment, as Councillor Bamforth referred to. The Labour amendment stated they would formulate a council-wide policy for the deployment and maintenance of public access defibrillators. As previously mentioned, a paper was presented to Council in December, and I know that the Council has started the process in finding out what defibrillators are in the local area, and I welcome this. However, no new public access defibrillators have been installed. There might be 2 planned by parent councils and funded by parent councils, but none have been installed or planned since by the council. And as Councillor Bamforth points out, there is no money in the Provost Fund yet. There will be, and I welcome that as well. What is the point in the policy when this is of zero influence on the communities? We need actions, not just words. Councillor Bamforth was right when she said this was a choice about how we want to spend our money, and I completely agree with her. What better investment to make than one that could potentially save a life? As mentioned the last time this was raised, the reason Councillor Bamforth raised this was due to school parent councils getting in touch and asking for action on this. The reason I wanted to second this was because I'd been contacted by Jean Hepburn, a charge nurse at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, who runs Heart Start classes in East Renfrewshire and had been running them across Renfrewshire schools. She noticed that Renfrewshire schools had defibrillators and thought it would be a good idea if East Ren also did this. Jean looks after all of the defibrillators funded by the Leven Valley Community Defibrillator Partnership, and was explaining to me how much work goes into the maintenance and administration required when someone accesses the defibrillator. What the community want is a network of defibrillators installed and maintained by East Renfrewshire Council, but this administration doesn't listen to what the community wants. Tonight it chose not to listen to our communities on pesticides, it didn't listen to our communities on school librarians, it didn't listen to our communities on the disposable vape campaign. In the words of Keir Starmer at PMQs today, no one voted for this shambles. I'm sure the Labour voters didn't want to have an administration being led by the Tories. I urge you all to listen to the community and support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Lundy. I'm going to go to the mover of the amendment now, and Councillor Pragnell.
Thank you. This evening I will be proposing an amendment to this motion. There is no doubting the important role that defibrillators and CPR play in saving people's lives. This is exactly why the Labour-led administration made a commitment in our manifesto to create this Council's first public access defibrillation PAD strategy, with the hope of increasing the number of publicly accessible defibrillators across East Renfrewshire. May I also add that we were the only political party to do so. I am very grateful for the support we have for this strategy from council officers, community groups and the general public, and their willingness to work together for positive outcomes. Since the PATH strategy was developed in East Renfrewshire, a number of actions have taken place. All 26 council-owned devices have been checked and maintained and registered on the British Heart Foundation, the Circuit database. There is currently an ongoing live survey locally which has identified that there are over 60 defibrillators across East Renfrewshire. It should also be noted that the Save a Life Scotland have cited East Renfrewshire Council's strategy as an example of good practice and have signposted the work to other local authorities in enhancing defibrillator provision. Work is ongoing with local community groups to provide the appropriate legal, insurance and procurement standards. This takes time to ensure long-term sustainable provision and maintenance of PADs. There is also the imminent installation of 2 new defibrillators at 2 local schools in collaboration with their parent councils. In addition to this, there are various completed or imminent installations of defibrillators by a community council, 2 local charities and a local business. I would also like to thank the providers of a very generous donation of £9,000 to help start the Provost Community Defibrillator Fund. This fund has been set up to allow donations to be collected for funding public access defibrillators and related projects, including raising awareness of life-saving skills of CPR and how to use a defibrillator. This fund will formally launch on Tuesday the 19th of September. Thanks must go to the numerous individuals, community organisations and charities for working with the Provost to deliver a sustainable solution for the people of East Renfrewshire. I would also like to thank the Provost for her ongoing personal commitment to this very important cause and her dedication to setting up the Provost Community Defibrillator Fund. As you can see, a lot of progress has been made so far. Council officers will submit a final report to the December full council meeting on the work that has been undertaken on this strategy, which will include information on the cost of this programme going forward. I am disappointed that the SNP group have failed to approach the administration to discuss this strategy. If they had, they would have known of the good work taking place across East Renfrewshire. We know how cash-strapped local authorities are for funding after years of continuous cuts from SNP governments. The Scottish Government claim to take the need for more public accessible defibrillators seriously, however they are failing on this issue. The Scottish Government's own cardiac arrest strategy fails to mention how defibrillators should be funded. Similar strategies in England and Wales acknowledge that funding for such vital life-saving equipment will come from their respective governments. The SNP group are failing to hold the Scottish Government accountable for the failings to provide defibrillators in their own national cardiac arrest strategy. I urge them to lobby the Scottish Government just as others are. The previous SNP-led administration in East Renfrewshire failed to provide a budget for PAD maintenance, and there was an absence of any mention of defibrillators in the SNP group's budget proposal just months ago. I believe this speaks volumes. The lack of action taken by the previous administration has put East Renfrewshire in a disadvantaged position compared to other local authorities. This is why a strategy is vital, but it will take a lot of money and time to right this wrong. It is clear from the amendment that a great deal of work has been done so far and the good work continues. I urge Council to support the amendment and to work together to support this strategy and its positive outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tragnell. Councillor Anderson, would you like to speak now, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Provost. I find it quite difficult how to follow that, actually. I thought that was quite inspiring. But I have plenty to say. I think it would be appropriate when we talk to the amendment. I will make my points then. Sorry? Oh, sorry, absolutely. Right, okay. I thought, right, okay. Right then, I shall start. I think it's very appropriate that Councillor Pragnell has just pointed out there about the no provision for maintenance is the key thing about the previous administration. Okay, they may have approved the purchase in 2018 at Cabinet, but the key thing is the maintenance and the budget. So, moving on from that, and first of all, we welcome the work that's currently underway to identify the location of defibrillators within our communities. We'd like to acknowledge the work of officers, supporting the Provost as community defibrillator champion, and we look forward to the launch of the Provost Community Defibrillator Fund already mentioned to increase access to defibrillators. The installation of the 2 new defibrillators, I was at the Maidenhill Parent Council and was able to talk to them and discuss about the good news that it was going ahead, and it was very well received. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the Kirkhill meeting. I had another arrangement, another meeting to go to, but I believe that's obviously underway as well. So, beyond that, I'd like to note, obviously, the known defibrillators now across East Renfrewshire, I believe, is beyond 80, and the key thing is the registration of defibrillators on the British Heart Foundation circuit database. So that's now being encouraged through publicity so that a more exact picture can be determined. The Provost Defibrillator Fund is there to receive donations to support the defibrillator projects, and obviously we have the official launch approaching, but we already have been so many people with so much goodwill that are willing to actually work with the council and its strategy and doing what it can to progress this. So, sorry, I'll move on. The motion mentions that the unfortunate loss of potential match funding and funding for ongoing defibrillator costs for local community groups who wish to install their own. And obviously, the key thing was we already established that the Provost was the community champion to then would actually approach and talk to, because we are unaware of any issues, but if there had been, then clearly the Provost was the person to actually talk to about this. In terms of the options for funding, the initial cost and ongoing cost of maintenance for a defibrillator is a key part of it. We obviously have been lobbying the Scottish Government. The petition that was raised with the Scottish Petitions Committee has had several replies, and including from the British Heart Foundation, and they noted that funds have made many available in other parts of the UK. For example, the Welsh Government started with £500,000 in 2021, up to £1 million in 2022. Similar fund was then established in England as well. And both of these have had a focus on ensuring that funded defibrillators were placed in areas of need, and that they should also be clearly part of the circuit. The British Heart Foundation would support a programme of support from the Scottish Government to increase the number of defibrillators in the community. So they are obviously behind it. And also, I'd like to point out the Teachers' Union, the NES UWT, again submitted to the same committee petition and supporting the call to the Scottish Parliament to urge the Scottish Government to support the provision of defibrillators in public spaces and workplaces. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand my own notes here. Beyond that, I'd like to talk maybe actually a bit about the role of the Provost as a defibrillator champion, both in a personal capacity and community leadership role. For the Provost, losing a close family member to a sudden heart attack in Sainsbury's where there was no defibrillator, she then set about trying to persuade Sainsbury's to install one. Not deterred by their actual refusal, she raised funds to install a life-saving defibrillator there at Christmas. And following her campaigning along with a charity, Sainsbury's agreed to install a further 20 in their stores. So she clearly is the right person to be the champion locally in East Renfrewshire. The petition that I've already mentioned to the Scottish Parliament calls for the increase in defibrillators in public places and calls for the Scottish Government to work with the UK Government to also amend first aid regulations to include a defibrillator requirement for organisations over a certain size, including large supermarkets.
Councillor Anderson, your
Sorry,
time's up.
Okay.
So just if you just want a last word, okay then, on you go.
No, that's probably a good point to actually finish, Provost. Obviously, I support that amendment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are there any other comments? Okay. And Councillor Ray.
Provost, if I may, I don't know what it must be like to sit there and be lectured to about the importance of defibrillators, and I find that the manner in which these people have just read from pre-prepared speeches, word for word, taking absolutely no cognizance of the amendment here and the huge effort that you personally have put into making sure that this council makes big improvements in making sure that defibrillators are readily available. So Councillor Anderson has already alluded to it. More than happy at the progress that has been made here, and on that basis, happy to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. I'll annoy Councillor Wallace by reading from my notes as I go through this. I fully support, again, this SNP motion before us tonight. I was extremely disappointed at the time when we brought it before, when it was voted down, and you, Labour and Conservative partnership, voted down the publicly accessible defibrillators at all our schools. And I remain disappointed by the amendment before us tonight. I keep going on about ambition. It's not there. The need for these defibrillators is a critical one and cannot be delayed. The urgency of this issue, together with the unfortunate and quite disgraceful lack of action by this council in just paying for them themselves, is the reason that my colleagues have had no option but to bring the motion back to full council. The current administration have produced a paper that states the focus will remain on increasing access to pads, which is to be welcomed across East Renfrewshire, where funding allows. They're simply not good enough. And other councils have made the decision to fund the installation of a network of publicly funded defibrillators, as we did. I think there was a fund, you were talking about, a fund that went in the last administration towards a certain amount. Other councils have done this. Councillor Bamforth mentioned Renfrewshire Council. Eastern Bartonshire Council did the same. They made that decision. Their council leader stated, the evidence is clear that where external defibrillators are available in an emergency situation and are used before the arrival of emergency service, they can be life-saving. That was said as the decision to fund these was passed unanimously at East and Berkshire Council, which is to be applauded. Thank you very much for them. The decision made tonight is a political one. There is money available for this. I don't know why you're choosing not to fund this right now. I do not genuinely understand how many times we have to bring it back and keep asking you. I welcome the work you're doing, but you can fund this right now. We had millions of an underspend in the unaudited accounts for 22-23, millions. We've sat and seen a paper that asked for 3 million tonight. Now we may get that back, but we might not. But this is nowhere near those amounts. Just pay for them, people, please. Just pay for them. Thank you.
Councillor Redland.
Thank you, Provost. I'm sitting here wondering, after having a superb council meeting until we came to the motions, where for the first time since I've been elected, everybody agreed a consensus, and we all agreed and we all worked together. A great sight to see. Unfortunately, these motions, and particularly this one, have reduced us to a debating chamber. Now, I didn't interrupt anybody, so I don't expect to be interrupted. When I was first elected, about a month after I was elected, I went to the Maidenhill Parents' Council. Now, Maidenhill Primary School is in the same ward as Councillor McLean, Councillor Anderson and Councillor Bamford. At that meeting, I was told by a member of that council, the Parents' Council, that they couldn't get a defibrillator because Councillor Bamforth and her administration wouldn't provide one. that was what I was told. They then, when we discussed it, they went to, I think it was Asda, and they got the funding for it. Now, I then said at that point that I would work as much as I can to help with funding of other defibrillators. I then attended subsequently a meeting at Kirkhill Primary School where the Provost attended, along with Councillor Bamforth, as far as I remember. And at that meeting, we all agreed how great it was that the Provost was doing this work, and it was a labour of love because she is doing this because she was affected by her husband's untimely death when a defibrillator could have helped. And at that meeting, I remember Councillor Bamforth saying how great it was because we all know the council hasn't got the money for defibrillators, and it's great that the Provost is doing this. Now, I have embraced the work that the council has, the Provost has done, as I believe all my party has, and I believe the vast majority of this council has done. And this motion, so soon after the last one, it's an absolute travesty of the work of the council because we need to support the Provost and what she's doing. It's a superb project that she's doing. She's raised £9,000 already. I take my hat off to her for it. We have got to work together, get these defibrillators in, and come in behind the Provost instead of this petty bickering and trying to score political points over things that are a matter of life and death.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edlund. Are there any other colleagues in the Chamber wishing to speak? Councillor Morrison, Councillor McLean.
Thank you very much, Provost. I would simply echo my colleague Councillor Edlund's comments. It's a shame the consensus we achieved only lasted 2 hours. I think your efforts, Provost, are to be congratulated. However, referring back to the original motion, the amendment proposed in October 22, those efforts should not be required. The instruction was that the Scottish Government was to be lobbied to provide additional funding. I can only assume that lobbying fell on deaf ears, because we're sitting here and it's great that the third sector, that the community organisations out there, that the private donations that you are soliciting are generously coming forward to step up to the plate, but I'm acutely aware of the fact that the Scottish Government have let the Council down in this regard. And it's not just a one-time cost. You can't take a one-time saving which the Council has met, because you have to fund the maintenance of these for the longer term. It's not a one-time thing. Yes, you have to pay to install it, but you have to pay to maintain it. It's a shame that that lobbying has been unsuccessful. Indeed, my MSP colleague Alexander Burnett also joined the calls in October 22 to lobby the Scottish Government to fund a state-funded defibrillator in every school in Scotland. Not just in East Renfrewshire, but across the whole of Scotland. So the lobbying has gone much further than just us as East Renfrewshire Council. It's gone to Holyrood, it's gone to the Parliament of Scotland, and this is still falling in deaf ears. Councillor Bamforth suggested some of the reasons why, in her opinion, the Scottish Government may not have the funds to give us in local government. But let's remember, Scotland is the most highly taxed part of the United Kingdom. This is what our residents are paying extra income tax for. This is what our residents are paying more than other counterparts in the UK for. It should be to have that additional investment come to us locally to spend on this very important and very salient issue. So yes, congratulations to the Provost and for those community organisations that have stepped up. But let's remember, they are filling a gap which has been left by the Scottish Government and how they fund local authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morrison. Councillor McLean.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief here. It was just to pick up on a point of the motion in Note C. It says this has led to an unfortunate loss of potential match funding and funding for ongoing defibrillator costs for local community groups who wish to install their own defibrillators. Off the top of my head, I could name 8 funders right now who would fund this sort of thing. In fact, I've had discussions with Russell McMillan of East Rhine Good Causes, particularly about this, and he has advised it to come to them if he's needing funding. In fact, my own family are putting one in Eaglesham at the Eglin Arms Hotel, so there is plenty of funding there. I'm not quite sure where the loss of potential match funding has come from, but there is plenty of funding out there for these sort of things for local community groups. I've advised 3 one in Busby and 2 in Mearns, and my own one to go for it. So there is funding there for that. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the chamber now wishing to speak? No? Okay, thanks. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. I think, again, I'd like to applaud the Provost for her personal commitment and drive to deliver on this strategy. What perhaps the members of the SNP group have not been seeing is the work and meetings developing those relationships, and those have all been very positive. So that is a great example of council working with community groups to help deliver what our communities want. We should be encouraging that sort of behaviour in all of what the council does, and this is a good example of that. As our advisors were talking, that the strategy is exemplary, and they're using that to help on other councils and what they're doing. I think it's very disappointing that the SNP never lobby their own governments on any funding issues. Everything is perfect at the Scottish Government, and they would not even admit that perhaps we could lobby for the equivalent of what Wales has got or what England has got to help fund their own cardiac health strategy. We are working within our budget means to deliver a strategy that is involving all of the community, and that should be applauded, and well done to the Provost for that. I would go to the amendment and the note at the end that we will come back with a report on potential costings. So I would encourage all group leaders, as we're in the budget strategy group and as this item is considered, to reflect on that. No one from the SNP has raised that at all in any of the budget strategy group meetings we've had to date. So I'm welcoming that they want us to invest more in that. Hopefully we can get consensus on that and understand from council officers what that may mean. So I think what we're seeing in this paper, in this amendment, is real progress over the last year, and a momentum of activity that's going on, and we look forward to seeing the results of that paper coming to council in December. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So I'm just going to say a last word on this, and it's really the motion B in the motion says it's been no. Oh, Councillor MacDonald, on you go.
Thanks, Provost. Very briefly, I just wanted to correct what I believe is a factual inaccuracy on that statement that has just been made by the leader. And that is, I think it's a bit unfair to suggest that the SNP have not lobbied the SNP government for funding. I seem to remember when Councillor Buchanan was leader of this council in the last administration, he added his name quite robustly, I might add, to a joint letter to central government in Scotland pushing for more funding for local authorities. So to suggest that no member of this
Councillor MacDonald, sorry, I have to consider. Sorry, Councillor MacDonald, I have to consider a point of order.
Often I'm just trying to make the point. The point was incorrect.
Sorry, Councillor MacDonald, you have to stop speaking when it's a point of order, so I have to stop you. And Edlin, if it is a point of order rather than a point of information or opinion. Sorry, can I just finish this? I just have to establish and be strict on points of order and proceedings. So, and it's to do with our standing orders. So if there's something that's happening that's contrary to standing orders, rather than, agreeing with Councillor MacDonald, so could you tell me which point in the standing orders?
I can't give you the number, but it's not about what he's saying, it's about the procedure, which makes it a standing order.
Okay.
The point I want to make is it in order for a councillor to interrupt another councillor when speaking in this way?
I'm not aware of a councillor actually interrupting another councillor when speaking. If you were suggesting that Councillor MacDonald was interrupting somebody, then it would be for me as the chair to keep control of the meeting.
To me, it seemed he was asking you to step aside to let him speak.
I see. No, sorry, I didn't notice that he had raised his hand to speak, but thank you for your consideration, and other members brought it to my attention that he wanted to speak, so it was quite in order for me to give way to Councillor MacDonald and bring him in. Okay, are you all right with that? Thank you very much. Councillor MacDonald, back to you. Thank you.
Firstly, apologies, Provost. I had failed to hear Councillor Edlin call out a point of order, and I thought that you were inadvertently cutting me off from allowing me to speak, so I made that mistake. So please excuse that mistake. I was just wanting to highlight the point to Councillor O'Donnell that Councillor Buchanan, as leader of the last administration, added his name quite robustly to a long list of leaders across the whole country, calling for an increase in public funding to local authorities. To suggest that the SNP don't ever lobby their own government is factually inaccurate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald, but can I clarify in my observation that the calling on the Scottish Government was to fund their out-of-hospital cardiac arrest strategy specifically. It wasn't in general. Yes, there have been calls to the Scottish Government by COSLA and collective councils, but that is a separate issue to this call on the Scottish Government to fund defibrillators. So, just to have as a last word, as I was saying, it's just to kind of clarify, and it's my role within the defibrillator strategy about the kind of inadvertent inaccuracy in the motion that said that there had been no new defibrillators installed or planned in East Renfrewshire. Well, we know that's not the case. Councillor McLean has just cited examples. There have been some in the news recently, and so there have been defibrillators installed. I am aware of different local community groups and charities who are in the process of installing defibrillators or who wish to raise money for that. That underlines the need for anybody, all groups, all community groups, all businesses to, if they have a defibrillator, to get it on the circuit, to have it registered and to put on the circuit so that the 999 call handlers are aware of the locations of it, and that's part of the strategy and what I aim to do in working with others, community groups, charities, other organisations, and for you to do that too. So I'm calling on you or anybody who's viewing this, if you see a defibrillator, could you ask them, is it on the circuit? Could they do that? And I'm also asking everybody, I'm on a mission, if they have a defibrillator inside anywhere, could you please, whether that's church groups, anybody who has one, could you go the next step, put it in a cabinet on an external wall, get it registered on the circuit so that we have more available 24/7. And the come back to the amendment here, item B, it says welcomes various recently completed or imminent installation in communities by other organisations. I have to applaud the support, the positivity that I have received from individuals, community groups, people, strangers coming up to me and applauding what's done. The only negativity I have to say is experienced is by some colleagues, and I'm sorry to have to say that. But on a positive note, yes, there has been a big donation from another family who look at, like ours, suffered a bereavement through cardiac arrest. And there's a lot of people like that who feel, like me, that this is a community response that should be, the council doesn't have money. We know that. Unfortunately, there have been cuts, and I'm not saying that in a political way. I'm just saying these are the facts that we faced. But also I am heartened by going forward and working together with a number of charities and groups to improve things in our area. And the donation that was made was from that family was just absolutely overwhelming. And as we speak, there's somebody else walking the West Highland Way you know, 100 miles, and I'm sure he'll walk 100 more to raise funds for this. People are willing to take ownership of this and to invest emotionally and whatever way they can for us to do this as a community. So I would ask you to try and not be political, get the politics out of this and come together and please work together and let's do this. Thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to Colin. Sorry. Oh, sorry, Caroline. Caroline, sorry, Councillor Bamford, could you sum up, please?
Thank you.
Can I just say one thing, because you did ask that about the parent councils. I was involved with the parent councils and I said I would look into what could be done, and to cut a long story short, there were difficulties with the council not having budgets to install it, to the maintenance, and there was options about maintenance. Could the parent council do it? Could we get somebody else to do it? But again, for a lot of community groups, there's fear there about who's responsible, who does the maintenance, and I've since found out that the maintenance isn't, as I feared, somebody with a screwdriver, and so there's a lot has been done, there's been a lot of work, and it's not as easy as you would think. So, but we are on a good road forward, and through the money that became available and working in collaboration with the parent councils, then it was able to be done with both Maidenhill and Kirkhill. And the Provost Fund is open for any donations, so hopefully whatever is spent will be reimbursed with the goodwill of everybody in East Renfrewshire. So I hope that helps. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say I have nothing further to add, but oh boy, it has been very political. I'm not going to. I have to, as part of my summing up, respond to some of the information that's been. Or when I say misinformation, some misinformation that's come out here. Councillor Edlin's chat about Maidenhill and Kirkhill, I would 100% refute. Maidenhill Parent Council Councillor Edlin attended, as he admitted, when he became a councillor. The previous administration was SNP Labour, and at no time in that meeting did I hear anyone say that the SNP administration had refused to pay for it. As for the Kirkhill, you were there, Provost, and Councillor Edlin was there, as Councillor Anderson was. I did not say the council did not have any money. I did not make that comment, and I want that on record. So, to answer another couple of things that have come up, someone mentioned, I think it was Councillor Pragnell, about why we didn't bring it up at the budget. It couldn't be brought up at budget, as we're all aware, or should be aware. The standing orders mean that you cannot, if something is brought up at council as a motion, it cannot be brought back up either to council or in the budget for at least 6 months. So because we had brought, it wasn't 6 months, it was only, the budget was in March and we brought it up the previous October. So we couldn't, that's why it wasn't in our budget proposals, otherwise it would have been. It was also mentioned about the previous SNP administration, and I find it quite baffling that none of the Labour councillors in here seem to admit the fact that it was an SNP Labour administration for the past 15 years.
Point of order, please.
And can I remind you, Councillor Morrison, that it's really what is contrary to the standing orders here? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It's regarding the standing order and point of debate. Councillor Bamford made reference to the standing orders herself in terms of a budget amendment, but we didn't hear which standing order she's referring to, because I don't believe there to be such a standing order to exist.
Can I just clarify, my understanding is, sorry, is your microphone still on?
Yes. Just like, if I've been asked to cite standing orders, then I think that should be consistent.
Councillor Bamford was referring to a budget meeting and the assumption that was made there, and she's entitled to do that, so we don't have to have a point of order with regard to her summing up and answering the point about it not being mentioned in the SNP budget. Now, whether or not that is correct, then we will find out in due course, but it's not contrary to standing orders for Councillor Bamforth to explain the reasoning or the thinking at the time of the budget. Is that okay?
Even though she made reference to the fact that she was prohibited from doing so due to standing orders.
I'm going to switch my phone off. My phone off. My microphone off. I'm just going to consult with Colin. So, just to explain what my reasoning was, is correct. The Councillor Bamforth is explaining the thinking behind the situation at the budget time and is not contrary to our standing orders at this meeting. Okay, thank you.
And I could clarify it's Standing Order 30, and I clarified it with Eamon Daly at the time before, because we would have brought it up in our budget in March this year, and Mr Daly, the previous Democratic Services Manager, confirmed that to me. That's what I was told. Or we would have brought it up. Anyway, to go back to what I was saying, SNP Labour administration we were in coalition for around 15 years, and it just amazes me how now suddenly we weren't in coalition, and everything that was decided in last administration was an SNP decision. When that decision was made in 2018, to buy the defibrillators, to fund the defibrillators, it automatically included the maintenance, because the maintenance has been carried out on these defibrillators since. So I don't understand how comments were made about the older defibrillators that were installed subsequent to that decision have not been maintained, because they have been. The motion that was brought to, I'm not quite sure what it was called, to the Scottish Government, which I understand you brought, Provost, is around public spaces and workspaces. It's not the same as what we are proposing, which is around our schools. There was comments made about collaboration. Now, the collaboration is... somebody mentioned earlier about democracy or a debating chamber. We are, in effect, a debating chamber. That is the point. Now, we in East Renfrewshire, we've had 3 motions this meeting, which is very unusual. But can I draw your attention to other councils? So, as Mr Quinn will no doubt remember, in Renfrewshire, the last 3 meetings had 10 motions, 13 motions and 13 motions. Glasgow, 5 motions, 4 motions, 5 motions. South Lanarkshire, 6 motions. North Lanarkshire, 9 motions. It is a normal democratic process that at council meetings, particularly if you're not in administration, to bring forward motions. So it was appropriate that we brought this forward again, because we, as you heard from Councillor Ireland very eloquently, we feel very strongly that despite the fantastic work the Provost is doing, and we obviously were not aware of the £9,000 or the other things that have appeared since our motion was put forward. Some more information has come to light. However, we are still of the belief that this should be paid for and can be paid for by the council. You know that, and I understand Councillor Pragnell mentioning about cuts and about Scottish Government cuts, but I'm sure Councillor Pragnell listened to Angela Rayner yesterday.
Councillor Bamforth, I have to stop you now. You're well over now. Sorry.
Well, am I over because I got interrupted?
No, we started again and it's over again. So
I suggest you look at Angela Rayner saying the Tory government have underfunded for 13 years, chronically underfunded councils.
Sorry. On to Colin now for the conducting of the vote.
Thanks again, Provost. Again, members are asked to vote in favour of the motion or the amendment, or to abstain. Please respond, motion, amendment or abstain, when I call your name. It's been confirmed that both Councillors Convery and Cunningham have left the meeting. Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bamford.
Motion.
Councillor Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Campbell.
Amendment.
Councillor Devlin. Councillor Edlin.
Amendment.
Councillor Ireland.
Motion.
Councillor Lundy.
Motion.
Councillor MacDonald.
Motion.
Councillor McLean.
Amendment.
Councillor Merrick.
Motion.
Provost Montague.
Amendment.
Councillor Morrison.
Amendment.
Councillor O'Donnell.
Amendment.
Councillor Pragnell.
Amendment.
Councillor Wallace.
Amendment.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. That's 6 in favour of the motion, 10 in favour of the amendment. The amendment's carried.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your attendance. I will now close the meeting.